we've now got 15 minutes to have questions, comments, perspectives from the audience. I can see one person in the middle there, and a couple of people down here as well. So, and I'll try and ask people who haven't asked a question before. Can we turn the lights down at all so we could see the audience? And turn the lights in the audience up, maybe? Yeah, anyway, go with the first question. Don't forget to say who you are.
Is this on? Can everybody hear me? Hi, I'm Ashton Kelly. I'm an emergency medicine clinician in Australia. My question is, and I've wrote it down for clarity's sake, does the panel consider the ownership structure of the major media companies in Australia a formidable barrier to achieving significant policy changes? Are there lessons we can learn from other countries to confront this issue? Thank you.
Who would like to take that question on? I think Cassandra. The answer might be yes.
Yes, but.
Yes.
It's a yes, but for me at this point about the power and influence of, what's colloquially known as the Murdoch press, for example, in Australia, where there's sort of a concentration of, media ownership and what you can see, in some of those particular outlets. We see it a lot, for example, with a newspaper called the Daily Telegraph, as an example of where quite often what you'll see is often in collaboration with the government of the day, the sort of setting up of a very nasty story about somebody, dodging Social Security and, the outrage of that behaviour, which is actually laying the groundwork for Social Security cuts and, debunking it. Once it's on the front page, it's all you're playing catch up, trying to show that actually the story has no foundation. But I think we've had a number of examples in Australia quite recently which shows that even when you have the sort of so-called mainstream press trying very hard to run a line, that the community understanding of who they trust is on our side. I think we've seen it most recently in the elections in Western Australia and also in Victoria in different ways. And we do have some evidence about the sort of on the trust side. Media, those kinds of media and journalists are very low on the trust barometer in the community. And then in fact, people like you, us, are actually at the highest on the scale about community trust. So, of course, our challenge is how to get direct lines of communication that cut across those kinds of outlets. I think that's the main game, whilst we continue to have another debate about media control and ownership in Australia and the regulation of that. I think a lot of our effort should be more and more on the ways we can use very powerful communication mechanisms that do not rely at all on those kind of papers. And what we've seen globally also is that people are walking with their feet in signing up to higher trust media outlets, platforms, and being prepared to pay for that because they really do want to know the facts.
Great. Vinya?
Yeah, I just like to add, I think this is a very important question because even in low-income countries, the media is controlled by a few private corporations outside the state media. State media, on one hand, is very highly politicized and they use for political propaganda. The private media use for, of course, consumer, promotion, and the same company may own the shares in the food industry as well, for example. So this is the contradiction, and it's very difficult to get a message across which is in public interest. But you have to separate the print media and the electronic media. Print media is somewhat independent, and we also have independent press which can be used mainly for health-related issues. That's what we have been doing, particularly to advance this course for a new bill on drugs, medicinal drugs. So I think it depends on the context, but it's a major problem that we as civil society also need to face. And unless we come up with, of course, social media is there, and we use extensively social media. And the print media can be used effectively, but for electronic media, radio and TV, we haven't honestly still found a way out.
All right, the question down here.
Yep. My name is Paul Walker from Washington, D.C., United States. Thank you all for the very good, helpful presentations. I had two quick questions. I haven't heard anyone talk about federal spending priorities per se, and I'm assuming federal spending priorities are a major determinant of public health in all countries. And in the United States, of course, we have our annual guns versus butter, debate. Well, our military budget takes up approximately two-thirds, or maybe even some years three-quarters of our discretionary federal spending. So it's a big issue as to what we're spending on military versus social spending, including public health. Secondly, Australia is quite big in extractive industries, and I'm wondering, no one has mentioned the extractive industries and the impact and pollution and public health impacts from your enormous extractive industries, most of which are quite dirty from what I understand. So I'd like someone to address that as well. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy on the second question about extractive industries. Yes, I think you're right. And one program of research we have in Australia is developing a corporate health impact assessment that a group of us are working on. And we've just piloted it on McDonald's in Australia. And it's published in Globalization and Health if you want to read that, but we're now moving on to look at Rio Tinto in Australia, and we hope to get funding to do a broader one. But I think you're absolutely right, because with corporations, it's not just the impact, say, of the extractive industry, externalizing, as I said in my talk, externalizing the impacts, but it's also the behavior, the way the companies are structured, the way taxes are avoided, and so on, because that's a lot of opportunity lost for countries. But with one mining company, I've seen a presentation from South Africa where the occupational injury rate in South Africa, same company, BHP, is something like 7 times higher in South Africa. Clearly that reflects regulation and the differences. But Maria, would you like?
I think we need to go to the basics on public health that are very powerful tools that we have, and we need to use it on a more maybe political way again. The WHO has published a report which I think is extremely powerful, and in the hands of a politician is something that I'm sure is terrifying then, because we said that every year we have 12.6 million premature deaths caused by exposure to environmental risk factors. I mean, you have to feel accountable to that. There is no way now to say, I didn't know. We are saying that we have every year 6.5 million premature deaths caused by exposure to air pollution. Most of the air pollution is coming from extractive industry and others. So I think those very strong arguments, it needs to be used politically and make sure as citizens and as public health officers that the politicians have not a way to escape that and say, I didn't know. I didn't know about asbestos, and therefore we have a Minister of Health, a former Minister of Health in France, responding now to a tribunal, to a court, because she was made accountable for the fact that she was Minister of Health when all the evidence about asbestos was already there. And she is about to go to jail. Maybe one day we will have a similar situation where people say, well, you knew about air pollution, what have you been doing? And but we need the voices of the public health community a little bit stronger. Somebody was mentioning the Kardashians. I don't like that simile, and particularly when it's with a woman, sorry. But I think we need more pediatricians, more public health officers, more pneumologists, more neurologists talking about how air pollution is affecting the health of the people. and therefore putting the governments on the position to say, I have to take the right choices in terms of the energy sources that my country is using. So, but I don't hear that voice enough. And this is maybe the good opportunity for the public health community to start to be, as we used to be in the past, people who will be influencing everything. When I was a child, and it was not prehistoria, it was, yeah, you know. I mean, at that time, I remember the physician, the doctor of my village, he was everywhere, and he was feeling empowered to tell you, oh, this is stagnant water. You cannot have stagnant water here. This is not good for health. Or going to an industry saying, this chimney is polluting. I don't want this because then I have a lot of patients with respiratory disease. I don't see that now. I think we as the health community, I'm a physician by training, we are arguing and promoting more hospitals, more technology, more facilities for our diagnosis and treatment, which is fantastic. Obviously, we want the best, but we need to be very vocal as well on advocating for the causes of the diseases, and particularly the way our society will be developing and now growing and influencing the health of our people.
That's great, thank you. I was going to, do you want to comment on the federal budget, Cassandra?
Yeah,
the question.
Just in the 15 minutes, and so that, for example, ACOS is the peak body in the sort of social policy area. In our federal budget submission, we call for the abolition of the diesel fuel rebate. There's a lot of tax arrangements in the Australian mining industry in Australia, which is historical and is absolutely hitting the bottom line on the budget. And so what we've been doing over an extended period of time is really, again, in this broader lines, drawing on the best of the expertise about what needs to be done, including in these areas. And so I think this is something about, I think often professionals feel like we've got to stick to our knitting is the phrase of the week in Australia, by the way, that we're meant to stick to our knitting. Well, we don't stick to our knitting. We'll talk about it as we see it, and of course we have to continue to make sure we're on strong, good expert grounds. We have sugar tax in our budget submission, alcohol tax is in there as well, you know, so this kind of policy work has to be done, but then being absolutely fine not to be shut up because, you know, we don't work in the mining industry to have a view on what should happen around that.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got a question here. Then I know I've been very frontist here. Then we'll have one from the back. So one here, then one at the back.
Tēnā koutou katoa, that's greetings from the land of Aotearoa, New Zealand. My name is Eileen Brown and I work for the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. So my question is about employment. Thank you, Maria, for talking about employment as a social determinant of health. And Cassandra, you spoke about that if we want to end inequality, that we have to lift the income of the bottom 20%, and that was, I think you said, from the IMF. Another quote, or another thing that the IMF have said is, if we want to end inequality, we have to restore collective bargaining and the power that collective bargaining brings in reducing inequality. So, you know, when I was a young person, the first thing we did when we entered work was we joined the union. And, you know, that's a very different time from today when, you know, many people do not know of what a union is, though, you know, we have today talked about civil society and partnerships. We've not really talked about unions, and for employment, it's very important. So my question is about how do we use unions, how do we use those public institutions, which unions are, and as a civil society group, to promote public health and as a lever in improving the social determinants of health.
Great, I might take that question, we'll answer it, and I'll just take the other question because then we'll have run out of time. So if you could ask the question at the back, then I'll ask the panel to each perhaps make a final response, including response to the two questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Toabet Bishau. I am from the African Federation of Public Health Associations. My question is, we have been talking about talking to politicians, talking to policymakers, and talking to different people as public health workers and public health professionals. But my question is, I would like to know how many of our schools in public health around the world produce dynamic, people-centered public health politicians to work from within and bring about the change from within than going out as public health workers and talking to politicians. We need public health politicians, and our schools of public health need to produce such personalities to be able to address this critical issue of policy making, advocacy, resource allocation, and so on and so forth. So I would like to know how many of our schools are doing this. If they are not doing enough, what must we do so that these schools will do enough of these critical competencies so that we have people from within the public health domain to influence whatever needs to be influenced. Thank you.
Great. So a question about public health politicians and trade unions and public health. And perhaps I could work along from this way, and if you have any comments, any final comments.
Well, the comments is that I fully agree. I mean, public health politicians and public health medical community and and politicians everywhere. There is nothing more political than the human health. So I think we need to do that. Whether we have enough, no, probably not. Our public health schools needs to attract more politicians or people with this type of vocation. The trade unions, that is a very interesting question as well. Most of our workers today, they work on the informal sector, so there is no way for them to have any possibility to join a trade union. And most of the trade unions today, fortunately, they are working already on promotion of public health approaches. I mean, how to quit tobacco or how to prevent sedentary life-related diseases. Hopefully, part of them are already moving into that dimension because the most basic protection of the health of the people has already been ensured. But it's definitely a movement that needs to be revitalized and joining forces with the public health community, no doubt.
Okay, very quickly on the issue of trade unions from the South African perspective, I would say the lesson is that we need to, that gains that we're going to make in the next decade or more about health equity, that we need to make sure that we maintain those gains. So the South African trade union movement, my sense is that health safety and, broader prevention, and the well-being of workers, those issues have fallen by the wayside. And it's been a complex set of issues as the trade union leadership have joined government because there's an alliance with the ruling party. There's also been the emergence of new trade unions that have not always been to the left of government. And so we now have a third trade union federation that's about to be launched, and my sense is the issues are more survival, and there's also leadership challenges, and that issues around health, well-being, and equity are probably low down on their priority list. And so that would be a lesson for the future. And in terms of schools of public health, I do think, Tiwabesh, we make, probably all schools of public health around the world produce graduates that go out there raring to go, but often systems hold them back. But I think the key is how do we mainstream public health? Because the public health community, let's face it, we remain on the fringes of a very powerful medical profession. That actually lobby for more hospitals, specialist care, etc. And so it's around how do we mainstream public health into other professional categories, where it's nursing, the rehabilitation therapists, or medicine.
Just a quick comment on trade unions. The public health, the People's Health Movement have had many trade unions as part of its campaign. Even in Sri Lanka, when you say civil society, it's a very broad coalition which included trade unions and faith-based organizations as well. In Sri Lanka, you will be very surprised to hear that the most powerful trade union is the Government Medical Officers Association. And that itself is a major challenge, and I think is a social determinant of health in Sri Lanka. On public health training to include political dynamics, I think in our curriculum now in all state medical schools, this is included in the undergraduate training and also in postgraduate training. It's a very serious subject that is being taught after it has been introduced in the mid-2008 like.
Just very briefly, I think for example, ACOS has a very close relationship with the ACTU, and we are talking on a very regular basis. I think part of what we're seeing, of course, which is the changing nature of work and the way that people work environments are operating as a real barrier to that kind of formal membership with unions in the way that was occurring. And so I think within the union movement, and that those are very, stand in solidarity with the union movement, there is new thinking being done around that. And I think we just all have to acknowledge we are in a particular environment of rapid change, and so some new innovative thinking about the way to connect with, young people and others that, the traditional styles of organising maybe need to be rethought, and I think that's very actively happening in Australia at the moment. But that kind of the principles of solidarity and collective action, I think that's what we've all been hearing today, just how crucial that is. Thank you.
I was on Saturday, I was speaking at the International Students of Public Health meeting, and it was running throughout the day, and was speaking about the social determinants of health equity. And afterwards, one of the students said to me, should I be a politician? It sounds as if the sorts of things that I need to do that you're speaking about. And I said, yes, why don't you? And then the second, in the Australian context, the AMA is one of the most powerful trade unions. Incredibly disappointing that the head of the AMA just very, very recently came out and said that he was concerned about jobs when the closure of the Hazelwood coal-fired power plant was put in place, rather than being concerned about applauding the possible health benefits. What was really impressive was how quickly many people contradicted the chief of the AMA and said, actually, the closure of the Hazelwood coal-fired power plant is so important for health. It will outweigh any of those negative possible economic benefits, in the way that the same sort of arguments were put in place when they were speaking about closing down the tobacco industry. So the power of very quick collective action coming from people like Doctors for the Environment and many, many others just in the past few days, I thought was very powerful. But just reminded us, if you've got a powerful trade union like the AMA coming out with absolute nonsense like that, then we've got to quickly break that down.
Great. Well, thank you very much for staying. I'm sorry we've run 5 minutes over, but I think it was a great discussion, and let me thank the panel.